Welcome to AlexGs Aquarium, everybody. Today I have an update on the 1600 gallon system. So I want to talk about everything that's been going on lately in the 1600 gallon system. It's been a while since I've done a full system update, and I really want to talk about everything that's been going on. Start off with the 720 gallon tank. Now, this tank has been doing really well. All the fish have been doing good, and there have been some additions that not everybody has seen. Now, I did an unboxing video a while back, and I showed that I had a pink face wrasse that was going to be going into this tank. And after it went through a quarantine period, it went into the 720 gallon tank, and it's been doing really well. But prior to adding the pink face wrasse, I did add some other fish, just haven't gotten around to putting a video out on them. The biggest ones, of course, and the most noticeable, which have been in some other videos, I just haven't talked about them, is a dogface puffer and a foxface. Now, both of these fish I've had now for over a month, and they've both been doing great. They also went through a quarantine period before they went into the 720 gallon tank, and ultimately they've been doing really good. The dogface and the porcupine have been getting along pretty good, other than a little bit of sparring over food here and there. But I will say, overall, they're getting along great. I did have 4 other additions to the tank, and I added 4 purple pseudochromis. Now, purple pseudochromis tend to be a little bit more of an aggressive fish, and they're usually not kept together. But given the size of this tank, and knowing that they can be a little bit more aggressive, I wanted to see if I could try putting a small group of them together. Now, admittedly, there were 5 originally that I put in. Unfortunately, on the first day, I believe one of them kind of gotten worked up to the corner by the damsels, and the puffer kind of took advantage of the situation, and I'm pretty sure that he ate that other purple pseudochromis. The rest of them did find their way down into the rocks, even though I had released them there in the first place. And after about a week and a half, the damsels and the rest of the fish started to accept them, and they started coming out and exploring the tank. They've now been in there for a couple of weeks at least, and they have all been accepted well and getting along fairly good. They have picked out some territories, but they haven't really been just going at each other. So it'll be an interesting thing to see how the purple pseudochromis do long term together as a group. The fish have been doing great in the 720 gallon tank. I have one issue that's kind of going on, which you could probably see behind me. There's a lot of hair algae in the tank. I'm not worried about it though, because while the hair algae has been kind of growing in this tank, I don't really have anything to really get rid of it. I have one long spine sea urchin which kind of clears off some of the rocks. Matter of fact, the rock right above my shoulder there has been cleared off, and the long spine kind of takes patches of the tank one at a time and just strips them of algae. The foxface also works on the algae a bit, and there's a total of 2 snails. Now, I'm not worried about this algae at all in here, because while the refuge starts growing more algae under the new UFO light, and the algae is growing in here, it is not growing in the 480 gallon tank, which is good. The corals in here have been doing pretty good, and I've only had one incident in here that's given me a little bit of a scare, and that is the porcupine puffer. I'd done a video a while back about feeding the fish, and in it, the porcupine puffer didn't come up and eat the cocktail shrimp that I was offering, although the dogface did. At first, I thought the porcupine was just being a little bit camera shy because the GoPro was in the water, but that was actually the first day for a whole week that the porcupine puffer did not eat. And the puffer did get a little bit lethargic, but I think I know what happened. The day before I filmed that video, the porcupine puffer was eating clam on a half shell, and I'm about 95% sure that the porcupine puffer ingested a piece of shell. Now, it's not a really big deal. It can potentially cause an intestinal blockage, but puffers do eat exoskeletons and potentially could eat shells. And it's not a bad thing, it's just something I had to watch. Now, it was a bit of a scare, but I just gave it time, knowing that while the puffer looked a little lethargic, it wasn't showing any other signs of disease or infection. And after a week, the puffer came out, happily started eating like a pig again. I'll have to redo the feeding video at some point and show you just how much food that porcupine puffer is willing to consume before I cut it off. Overall though, the 720 gallon tank is doing great. Let's go check out the 480 gallon reef tank. The 480 gallon reef is doing really good as well. The corals have all been doing really good. They've been growing like weeds in some cases. I've noticed growth in all the LPS, especially the giant bubble coral over here. I know a lot of people really love this coral, and I can assure everyone you really can't understand just how big that coral is until you see it in person and look top down on it, because it is getting massive. But that's good because I really like bubble corals and they're one of my favorites. As far as the rest of the LPS in this section go, they've all been doing really good. Haven't had much in the way of problems other than my Blastomusa was getting flipped over a bit by the cigar wrasse, but that's something to be expected because it's kind of what those wrasses do, is like to flip things over. I've since glued it down to a rock and that hasn't been an issue. The SPS on the other side of the tank have also been doing pretty good. I've noticed at least two of the acrofrags are really starting to show a lot of growth. One has actually grown onto the branching rock structure in the tank. The other one is really starting to spread out and won't be too far from getting there itself. The other frags seem to be kind of doing okay, and I've just been monitoring them. I've been really trying to keep up with the calcium and alkalinity demand in this tank. Despite not having a lot of corals, all the coralline algae and the corals I do have been sucking it up like crazy. I am dosing between 3 and 4 cups a week of calcium and 3 to 4 cups a week of alkalinity. I've been trying to maintain my level of alkalinity about 8.6 and my calcium around 460. I have been having a little more difficulty with it though, because the consumption is just so high in this system, mainly due to just how big it is. As far as the fish go though, everything's doing really good. I did add the azure damsels and they're swimming around in here along with the royal grammas, and they've kind of got their own little group dynamic going. Nobody really seemed to care that they got put into the tank, which is kind of what I figured, because the royal grammas just kind of keep to themselves, and maybe other than a little light chasing, they really haven't given too much thought to the damsels being in the tank, which is good. What I like about this tank though is while I don't have a lot of the way of big fish yet, a lot of these little colorful fish are really nice to be able to come downstairs and see them kind of swimming around as a group in the tank. But there'll definitely be more additions to this tank and the 720 gallon over time. One thing I will say is that the refuge tank has been doing good, and the UFO light, while it's only been running for less than a week, it is starting to show some signs of algae growth in there. It's kind of some nasty, slimy algae and nothing at all desirable. I do have a couple tiny pieces of Chaeto and some red macroalgae in there. Whether or not they survive, we'll just have to see. I'm glad the UFO light is growing some algae in it. Good or bad, it is taking nutrients out of the water that could be utilized by algae in this tank to grow, or the 720 gallon tank. It'll definitely take more time to get the algae bed under the UFO light established. Once it does though, I'm pretty confident that it's really going to help to eliminate a lot of the algae issues in the displays. As it does, I'm going to keep an eye on things and monitor them. And if it becomes necessary, I'm just going to add more UFO lights and expand that algae scrubber system until it eliminates any kind of nuisance algae growth in the display tanks. Moving on to the fish room, the protein skimmer has been doing great. It's been pulling tons of stuff out. I'm probably going to step up cleaning to a couple of times a week. The UV sterilizer's also still been running good. And I do have the shelf over the sump where the protein skimmer is cleared off. There will be something going there in the near future, so stay tuned for that. And the heating system has also been running well for the 1600 gallon system. I will be interested to see how my humidity and temperature inside the fish room changes as I move into the summer months. Now, I didn't have all the high-powered lighting or most of the filtration running for the majority of last summer, so it'll be interesting to see how my humidity control maintains and temperature control maintains within the fish room as it heats up. I'll definitely be putting out updates on that, so I want to share with everybody exactly what's going on. That's what I wanted to cover in today's 1600 gallon system update. I hope everybody enjoyed the video. If you did, please go ahead, hit that thumbs up. Of course, if you have comments or questions on the 1600 gallon system or anything about aquariums in general, please feel free to leave them down below. I really enjoy going through the comment sections on the videos and interacting with everyone out there in the community. Of course, if you want to see more on the 1600 gallon system and its journey, go ahead, hit that subscribe button. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and I will see you on the next video.